Are you still dealing with gut issues, bloating, constipation, reflux, even after trying medications, probiotics, or new diets? If so, you're probably overlooking the actual starting point for healing your gut. Let's start with what matters most, the facts and the fix. So even if you only stay for a minute, you're going to leave with value. If you're still having gut issues after taking medications, trying probiotics, or elimination diets, it's because you've missed the actual first step, the part almost everyone overlooks. You have dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of the microorganisms in your gut. Your diet's most likely feeding it, and nothing is going to change until the input into your gut and the way you think about how this problem is starting changes also. So what's the fix? Well, gut symptoms aren't going to resolve until you improve the terrain. So if you want to know how to do that, well, stick around for the rest of the video. Now, if you've already begun to see a new direction in supporting your gut, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button and drop a comment down below and tell me if your symptoms have continued to come back. Now, if you've never watched one of my videos before, I'm Dr. Arland Hill. I'm a clinician and I'm a rancher, and I see both sides, the physiology and the food. This video is going to deliver a clear message. Don't overlook the simple but profound first steps to fixing your gut. You most likely keep overlooking dysbiosis. You have to stop asking, what condition do I have? What condition am I dealing with? The question we want to ask instead is, what dysfunction are you dealing with? That's the most important point. And more times than not, when it comes to the gastrointestinal tract, that dysfunction is going to have a connection to dysbiosis. Dysbiosis, again, to be clear with this, is an imbalance of the bacteria, the fungi, the parasites, even what are called archaea. In short, the different microorganisms that are in your gastrointestinal tract, if those are imbalanced, that is dysbiosis. We have the beneficial organisms, but we also have organisms that are constantly moving through our gastrointestinal tract that are either outright problematic, we call those pathogens, or they're opportunist. We want to keep those opportunists at bay and completely eliminate or not be concerned about the pathogens. To do that, we have to optimize those beneficial organisms. Any deviation away from that optimal, that's dysbiosis. And dysbiosis is very well established as a driver for things like IBS, overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine, candida overgrowth, things like H. pylori, which is linked to reflux, folks struggling with constipation, and how many individuals are in that category? That's an extremely large portion of the population. More times than not, that is driven by dysbiosis. If you're dealing with symptoms like chronic bloating or food sensitivities, or even if you're struggling with named conditions, inflammatory bowel disease, these are going to more times than not have connections to dysbiosis. So it's not just calling out an overgrowth or an infection. It's really about how that overgrowth or infection is leading to systemic dysfunction, but that it's exacerbating the dysfunction locally in the gut first, and then that begins to spread systemically throughout the body. Keep in mind that when it comes to medications, if you're a person that's been using medications are meant to treat the symptoms. For what we're talking about with dysbiosis and thinking about dysbiosis as an underlying dysfunctional state, as a causative factor, medications aren't dealing with that imbalance. They're not supporting correcting that disbalance. And in many scenarios, they're actually agitating that imbalance. So you can't think about this as, I'm going to suppress my way out of this overgrowth or infectious problem. It just doesn't work that way. Now, the second thing that you need to be looking at here is your diet. Because the reality is that your diet is driving that dysbiosis. It's likely a contributor to it. I wish I had a dime for someone told me I have a good diet. And then I start asking questions and their diet's atrocious. So if you're the person telling yourself, oh, this doesn't apply to me because I have a good diet, chances are you're wrong. And chances are this actually does apply to you. Your gut flora eats what you eat. So whatever is going into your mouth is going to translate into what those microbiota in your gut are feeding on. And you have to literally develop the mindset that I am eating to feed my microbiota. I'm not just eating to feel satiated, to feel full, or to have an emotional satisfactory reaction to that consumption of food. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to make choices with your food that you acknowledge are supporting those microbiota. Because until you can do that and do that consistently, you're not going to correct the dysbiosis. If your symptoms keep coming back, it's because your diet hasn't changed enough to truly alter the terrain. And that's why I'm suggesting to you, if you're saying to yourself, oh, well, I'm good 75, 80%, even 90% of the time, that may not be enough. It may be that 10 to 25% of the time, whatever you're consuming is creating enough dysfunction that your microbiota aren't stabilizing, and it's allowing those harmful opportunistic organisms to proliferate. So some of the things that I've often seen that fall into this category, if you find that you're a constant snacker, and chances are you're feeding your dysbiosis because you're not allowing for optimal time between feedings to give your gastrointestinal tract time to flush the contents down into your large intestine to ultimately be eliminated out where they're not problematic. Eating all the time is not ideal. Processed foods, I alluded to this, but even a small amount can be problematic because keep in mind that many of these processed foods are laden with things that you don't want in there. There could even be chemicals in some of these if you're eating processed grains, right? Or eating foods that are refined in some way. It's not a whole ideal food. It's not what your microbiota is ideally looking to see and depend upon for their own ability to flourish and replicate. If you're consuming low protein intake is not going to give you the stimulation to optimize your digestive secretions, which means that your motility is likely going to slow down. It's going to create more fermentation in your gut, and we don't want an excessive amount of fermentation in the gut. Some is okay. We need some, but we don't need a ton of fermentation in there. It's consuming too little fiber in the diet. You don't want to go to the extreme and overconsume fiber or just depend on fiber. We want it as a balanced part of the diet, but it needs to be there. And if this is another one that I see a lot in this diet section where folks will say, oh, I just consume a few drinks a week, or I only consume 1 glass of wine per night. Well, if you're doing that, that's probably a contributor to why you're not balancing out your gastrointestinal function. Don't fool yourself that single drink is not having an impact. And I'm not asking you to be a purist. I'm not telling you to never have a drink of alcohol if that's what you want to do. But what I am telling you is that you've got to keep this conversation in context. If you're trying to figure out your gut dysfunction and it hasn't been improving and you're not willing to this point to make those steps to get rid of the alcohol, which could be a contributor to this, you're fooling yourself because it's most likely a driving factor. And then the last one that I'll leave you here within this group is that if you're consuming, say, for example, unhealthy inflammatory fats in your diet, well, those are going to be exacerbators for inflammation. Those are going to be exacerbators for not optimizing the integrity of your gastrointestinal tract. They're going to contribute to the disruption. They're not offsetting it. So be mindful about the quality of the macronutrients that you're taking in. You should be mindful about everything in your diet. Where am I getting it from? How much am I consuming of that? We should be connected to food, and too often we're not connected to food. And don't think that just taking some supplements is going to unravel this. It's not. They can be helpful. For sure, they can be helpful, but you can't supplement your way out of a bad diet. That's never going to offset overgrowth on a long-term basis. And the third thing that I'll leave you with is that there's a mental aspect to this. There's a mindset to this that you just have to shift. And if you don't shift the mindset and you're allowing yourself to have repetitive, deleterious thoughts, that's going to keep your gastrointestinal tract in a state of suboptimal health. If you're returning back to the same foods, you have the same habits, you have the same patterns, the same timing, the same stress cycles, these are all pushing dysbiosis forward for you. You have to break out of that. You have to lean into real proactive change. Again, this is all about mindset. And that may just begin with some of your actions throughout the day. For example, not eating too late or not grazing throughout the day. Shifting your mindset about how much protein am I going to get? If you're under-eating protein and you're even on the fence about under-eating protein, well, you're probably under-eating protein. So eat the protein, create the stimulus for your stomach acid so that you can optimize all those other gastric secretions that come from having adequate acid secretion and offset that overgrowth that is a part of that dysbiosis or can absolutely just outright be the dysbiosis. Don't skip the foundational steps. Skipping foundational steps, there's no positive outcome associated with that. So if nothing changes in your routine or changes about your mindset, nothing is going to change in your gut. So what's the real starting point here? The starting point isn't going to be what's often too frequently pointed to, which are supplements and stool tests or elimination diets. Listen, guys, I use supplements. I use stool tests. I manipulate my patients' diets. There is a place for every single one of those things, but they're not meant to be a negotiating point relative to your habits and your diet and your acknowledgement about what is going on in your gastrointestinal tract if you haven't been able to find success so far. If you've been able to find success, stop watching the video. Throw everything that I've said out the window because you have a plan that's working for you. But if you're listening to this and you have not found that starting point that's working for you, you're just constantly in a vicious cycle of gastrointestinal dysfunction, this is your message. This is your new starting point. Fix the inputs. Prioritize real protein in your diet. Acknowledge that you have dysbiosis. Stop looking for the quick fix. Just do the down and dirty work. Do the foundational work that you have to do to consistently address this, and acknowledge that unless we change the terrain throughout your gastrointestinal tract, nothing is going to change. So you have to think about, well, how am I moving? How am I hydrating? How am I sleeping? What kind of circadian rhythm function do I have, right? If these are all new concepts for you, we'll dig into my other videos and acknowledge how intimately associated with your gastrointestinal function these are, and that these are what are key to correcting this dysfunction and not necessarily just chasing down another named condition. Remember, your gut isn't healing because you're overlooking the foundation: dysbiosis, diet, and mindset. Now, if this information has helped bring new focus for you on what to do next for your gastrointestinal tract, don't forget to hit that like button. Guys, it really helps out. And make sure you share this video with someone else who's stuck as well. And if you want to learn the exact steps to repairing your terrain of your gut, especially when it comes to SIBO or H. pylori, well, go ahead and hit that next video on the screen. I'm going to walk you right through it.